Hey everyone, Brian here for Work to Game, and today we're tackling a very sensitive topic. This is one that I've been really kind of thinking on for at least the last week, and several of you in the community have sent me some articles and some videos regarding it. And it's actually it's complex in that there's really kind of three key areas that I want to focus in on that kind of tell an overall story. The title of this video is pretty much "We've Been Hacked," and how does it come to this? And it's really relating to psychology both in video games and in the real world. Now, when I first sat down, when I was first chewing on the idea and the topics, this really kind of stems from a couple of videos and an article really relating to EA and something they call DDA and EOMM. So DDA is dynamic difficulty adjustment, and EOMM is engagement optimization for matchmaking. And with those two ideas, when you go and actually look at this, Yang Yi is a YouTuber and he points this out, and he brings it up with the point talking about how this could be abused, obviously by EA. Definitely not a fan, and I don't want to come off as a EA apologist here, but I've got some thoughts on that. So we're going to talk about DDA, EOMM, the YouTube reaction to it. We're going to talk about some bad news when it relates to psychology, and hopefully helps, I guess, puts it into perspective what's kind of been going on over the last at least decade, probably even a little bit longer. And then we're going to kind of talk about how did it come to this? How did we get to this point in gaming history? And that is essentially what this video is about. I'm going to try to keep each kind of topic as condensed as possible, just so that we don't end up going down a rabbit hole, because each one is very deep. And I recommend that you check out Yang Yi's, Jim Sterling's videos. I'll be sure to include them in the links below. Matt Pat has a great video talking about Logan Paul and YouTube, and we're going to get to that here in a second. I highly recommend you check it out. And this video is not about Logan Paul. I do not want to talk about him. So with that, DDA and EOMM, at the core level, they are just these research and patents that EA is looking into to increase engagement in games. And Yang Yi makes the jump of saying that they're doing this because they want to increase monetization. And yeah, that's true. These EA, Activision, these are publicly traded companies, and we can call them greedy and we can call them evil, and it's easy to do so. It is really easy to make just that jump and just kind of say, they're evil, they're greedy. But the reality is they're just companies, publicly traded companies who are responsible to their investors to make money. And what they've done is they've done research in looking at how they can increase engagement in games. And this is nothing new. Nintendo has done this. There's all these companies that have done this. In fact, every company probably, if they're worth anything, are doing this. This is psychology. Now, Yang Yi talks about it kind of a psychological warfare. And I think that's unfair, actually, in the reality of it, is that DDA is about increasing the engagement by adjusting the difficulty of games dynamically. And necessarily, I don't agree with that. I think essentially if it's doing it behind the scenes without letting you know, that seems weak. Sometimes it's about the challenge, sometimes it's about these things. So I'm not necessarily a fan of these things, but essentially what their goal is with DDA and EOMM is to increase that engagement. How can they keep people more engaged in their game? And this isn't, and it's easy to hate on EA and Activision. And Activision's patent is a little bit even shadier, where they're talking about trying to target people's jealousies and envy to provoke spending and opening the wallet, trying to catch up. You see this in the real world, right? Somebody drives a nice car and you see it. It's a status symbol. Somebody spends more money on their coffee cup than anything else. This is unfortunately a fact of life. Envy is a real emotion that people have, and it's unfortunate to see that companies are trying to kind of target those emotions of people. And it's especially, I think, wrong when it's obviously targeting children and those young adults who might not know better, who might not have the kind of the wherewithal to sit back and do this. And this isn't a focus on children or young adults, because even adults, everybody is capable of falling into those categories. But that being set aside, this just makes sense. I am not surprised by this at all. In fact, DDA and EOMM if it does and it's effective at increasing engagement, that's technically good for the gamer. It's good for the company, because it's not that their engagement in and of itself is bad. Engagement's great, and it's already been shown hands down. Engagement in games, playing the game for longer, increases revenue, especially in the age of streaming, in the age of YouTube. Having these conversations, gaming has shifted into that conversation piece. It's shifted into what you're playing, and if you're playing it for a long period of time, well, then monetization opportunities go up. It's the same concept that when it comes to like a store that you walk into, like Apple, they've done psychological studies on how to position their computers in order to get engagement, because as soon as they can get your hands on the device, you're more likely to spend. It's not a one-to-one, and just because you've engage in the game more doesn't mean you're necessarily going to spend more. There's a more psychological components behind it. But to fault EA and Activision and Nintendo and all these companies by doing this, you got to take it into perspective, into context. And that's where I guess the second part is this I've got some bad news for you. YouTube, and this is where I bring up Matt Pat from Game Theory. Does a great job, but his latest video talking about how Logan Paul has continued to grow in EA's, not EA's, but YouTube's own algorithm encourages this kind of behavior with view time and how it functions and it works. I highly recommend you check out his video. Again, link in the description below. But even YouTube, you're using this platform, you're using it for free. YouTube is gathering information on you. YouTube has these algorithms that want to try to recommend videos for you. Amazon does the same thing. eBay, even your local Target. And this is where it gets really creepy when you talk about in context of big data. They've been gathering so much information on us over the course of time that it's almost scary, and you either ignore it or you don't. So a couple stories that, whether you're aware of them or not, hopefully I don't terrify you, because for me they're really concerning. So Target ended up informing a young woman that she was pregnant based off of her spending habits. She didn't know she was pregnant yet, but there was just something about her buying habits that led her and Target, with their prediction algorithms, to start to say, hey, maybe you want to pick up that baby carrier, maybe you want to register for a baby registry. And yeah, it turns out she was pregnant. And there's been even worse stories where the father, like the husband, or excuse me, the father of the young woman was informed that his daughter was pregnant, and she didn't even know. And so that is essentially kind of what we're dealing with here in this age, this big data era. These computers, these systems, the information that we give up on a day-to-day basis is feeding these algorithms to try and predict and give us the things that we're most likely to spend money on. So taking it out of the context of games, this is nothing new. This is general business, like almost 101. They want to know these analytics because they want to increase the opportunity to sell. And that in and of itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. You match the right customer with the right product, you're looking to buy something, well then here you go. Here is what people recommend. It gets even worse. So obviously there is some, stories that are actually kind of false flying around that, Facebook is listening to you. And while that's not actually true, what they're doing is far worse. Facebook knows so much about us, whether you're on it, even Instagram and all these, different social media platforms. They know so much about us. They know we've got friends that are having birthdays within certain periods of time. They know where we fall on a political perspective. They know where we fall, and they know where maybe our friends fall. They have all this information. They know where we like to travel, because obviously if you check into anywhere, like let's say you're going out of state, you check in, oh, hey, I see that you're visiting your friend that's in this state and he likes this. Maybe we'll advertise it to you. So the prediction algorithms are getting very sophisticated to a scary point. And the reason why it's come to this, so the final piece of the puzzle here, why it's come to this is because we've freely given up this information for these services. We've given up our information for YouTube, for Facebook, for Instagram, for Twitter, for any of these social media sites. We just continue to feed. We like the posts. They collect the data. It gets builds out these profiles, and they're constantly iterating on these profiles to build out a better system, to build out a better algorithm, a better learning bot, so that we can, be sold something. And so that in and of itself, it doesn't scare you. ideally what you should consider is that, how did it come to this? Is that when you look at first kind of how the internet formed, people were really willing to pay for these services. So websites obviously set up advertising, and the advertising sites, the advertisers want to try to get the best return for their investment. We're going to spend so much money running ads. How many clicks? How many? How does that generate into sales? And so that information has been collected, and over the last decade in and of itself, they've tried to develop these learning algorithms to try to really kind of specifically target with targeted advertising to us for that perspective. But bringing it back into the context of games and EA specifically, and then so we're talking about DDA and EOMM. This really, if I was going to blame one thing, I'd blame NFL Blitz, the video game. And if you guys weren't around or you weren't really aware of what happened, it was pretty much in the early 2000s. NFL Blitz was this, NFL licensed football game that was heavily violent. It was focused on, I think, 4 or 5, maybe even 3, I don't know. But it was really focusing on these epic hits, these incredible tackles, pile driving. It was just insane. It was very arcadey, but it was also a lot of fun. Around that same time, and this is, I think, kind of the irony if you look at now into 2017, with the NFL. But the irony is that the NFL didn't want this bad press. They didn't want this hyper violence associated with the NFL specifically. So what happened is that I think EA at this point capitalized on that fear and on that frustration, and they locked down the NFL into an exclusive agreement. They've since done it, or they did it before with FIFA. I don't, have a specific date on when FIFA got locked down, but even also with Star Wars, right? So, but with the NFL, they locked it down. Take-Two at the time said this is going to be bad for gamers, and it's not a good thing. And boy, are they right. Now, how do they go about and do this? Is that technically it isn't, a monopoly, because anybody can make a football game, but now only EA can make an NFL licensed football game. So what happens? Take-Two is obviously did the 2K football series. That doesn't exist anymore. So same thing with FIFA. So it's you really, if you want to, anybody can make a soccer game, but if you want an official licensed FIFA, if you really want those teams that you follow and love, there you go. And then they did it in 2013 with Star Wars. So it really kind of kicked off around 2005 from my perspective. And again, these things could have been long in the works. These negotiations probably were long in the works, considering the amount of money that has changed hands there. So, again, how did it come to this? Competition helps a system, in an open market. Competition helps winners win and the bad ideas fall away. But when you kind of have these monopolies, especially in, again, focusing in on these 3 big franchises, Star Wars, FIFA, NFL, you pretty much lock down a monopoly. And therefore, they're able to do these things, these experiments that they've been doing on us, and there is really no consequence. If it's a bad idea, okay, well, they still sold the game, because at the end of the day, most likely, this is an assumption, that you and I are actually in the minority. Now, we're a vocal minority, but when it comes to games, there's a huge wealth of gamers out there that really don't, follow the issue. You go look at, you go talk to anybody who enjoys playing video games, but isn't really involved in the conversation around YouTube, around the various video websites and forums and all that. They have really no idea that people are outraged. They're just, hey, this is a fun game. I enjoy playing it. Maybe I'll spend a little extra money, but that's on them. And and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but how it came to this is that these companies didn't have any competition. Yeah, you go make your soccer game, go make your Star Wars, you can't do Star Wars, but go make your game. And it's out there and people are going to choose it. But for the most part, the uninformed gamer, and even if the informed gamer who's actively passionate about their teams or their licensing or their intellectual property, has nowhere else to go. No other development company can make a competing Star Wars game. And that is bad, I think, for Star Wars. And we saw that happen this year. Competition is a good thing, and we have slowly gotten rid of it. And legally, this is a weird area because, again, you can make a shooter game. You can make, there's no real definition of monopoly. And then it gets even weirder because when you start to talk about intellectual property, nobody else can go make a Mario game, and nor am I making that argument because Mario is intellectual property, and they can say who has the right to do so. Even Nintendo's allowed Capcom to make Zelda games, and they did so like with the Minish Cap series and things like that. So we got here because you can call it greed, but you can just call it taking advantage of loopholes in the law, playing psychological games that is going on around us everywhere. You can't walk into your grocery store and not have somebody who's been, studying what are the best ways to lay things out. And I mean this, and this will be my final point. And so again, we shouldn't really fault EA and Activision for doing this. Everything in the data, everything that has led up to this point has pointed that this is the right way to go, and they've locked down things so that there's less competition, and that's why we've gotten to where we are today. The question is that what are we going to do about it going forward? And the answer is so complex, and so it requires a lot of effort and energy in each of us, that we either have to maintain this outrage, or we have to at least come together and petition either the ESRB or somebody to speak on our behalf as gamers. But back to the final story regarding the grocery store. There's a reason why you'll never see a grocery store, especially in the United States, that has empty bins, or at least one item. Psychologically, they've shown that if there's one item to choose from, that we automatically assume there's something wrong with that item. And so what they do is they keep stocking those items. And the problem with that has come from that is that we have abundances of food that just goes to waste, that just goes to these landfills, that just gets filled up and spit out because it goes to waste. Because otherwise, they're not going to sell that one last tomato or that one last orange. They're going to have to make sure they have an abundance of these items. And that is a psychological mindset that we as individuals have. That's where I fall. It's a weird video. Hopefully you've gotten something out of this. Again, regarding DDA and EOMM, it makes sense. It's logical that they would do this. Is it evil? I can't quantify that. They're trying to increase engagement in games, and yes, there is a positive output, and they wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for that. And they're responsible to the people who own stock in their companies to try and make money. And if you can, basically, it boils down to, if you could literally say, hey, you know what, if you colored your thumbnail blue, you would increase your sales by 120%. A simple little change with great lasting outcome. And, so any company is always looking to do that. Every company, your job, your boss, they know this about you, your presence on social media. And the option, unfortunately, is not to condemn social media. The option, we don't have the ability to say, nope, we're out. Because that kind of almost cuts us out from that conversation itself. So sorry to give you guys some bad news. Sorry to, hopefully this isn't a bum you out kind of video. Hopefully this is somewhat informative. Again, check out Yang Yi, Jim Sterling's post. Check out Matt Pat's video regarding the YouTube algorithm. Be informed, and stay engaged in the conversation, and make sure you continue to try to voice your concerns. So that's what I've got for you guys. Hopefully this wasn't this probably is a little bit abnormal length of a video, but thanks so much for watching. Sound off in the comments below what your thoughts are, where you fall. I'd love to hear from you and have that conversation with you. But for Work to Game, my name's Brian. Thanks for watching this video, and I hope to see you in my next. But until then, take care.
Hey guys, Chris here. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to see our next video, go ahead and click right there. If you'd like to see our vlog, click down below. The subscribe button should be right below me here, and you should see all of our contact information. Have a great day, and we will see you next time.